This Week in Agribusiness, serving America's most essential industry, is brought to you by Case IH. Coming up on this weekend's broadcast, that moving target on the waters of the United States. Hello, everyone. We welcome you to the broadcast. It's great to be back with you, as always. You know, lawyers are making some money on Wotus.
They certainly are, Max. It has been a busy period in the past 3 months with regard to the waters of the U.S. rule. It's a convoluted situation as things sit right now across the country. Some folks are under it, some folks aren't. I had the chance to catch up with Mary Thomas of the National Cattlemen's Beef Association for an update.
I think we got kind of spoiled in 2021 and 2022 because there just wasn't a lot happening in Wotus world, right? We had a proposed rule from the Biden administration, but really in October 2022, things started to pick up a lot of speed. So we had oral arguments at the Supreme Court. We saw the Biden administration finalize its definition, and pretty soon after, 3 different cases were filed in federal courts across the country. One in Texas, where a preliminary injunction was granted in 2 states, another in North Dakota, where a preliminary injunction was granted in 24 states, and another in Kentucky, where that motion for a preliminary injunction was actually denied. So quite varying takes and varying opinions from courts across the country, and those cases continue to move through the litigation process.
For producers out there on the ground, what does this mean in practice? What rule are they falling under?
If you live in one of those 26 states that's subject to a preliminary injunction, it is action as normal, right? Nothing new. Whatever features were jurisdictional are still jurisdictional, and the features that are not jurisdictional still aren't jurisdictional, right? If however you were operating in 2022 is how you should still be operating. But if you live in one of the 24 states that is not protected by a preliminary injunction, the Biden rule is the law of the land. So you need to have an extra conversation with someone before you start any kind of water infrastructure project this spring or summer.
Mary Thomas, the Biden rule being the law of the land, does it look like that's here to stay, at least for the time being?
I think that's a great question. So Congress has already acted with the Congressional Review Act to pass a resolution of disapproval of the Biden rule. I think that sends an important message not only to the White House, but to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court is actively considering Sackett versus EPA, which is the 4th time they've contemplated the definition of Wotus. So the decision in the Sackett case could certainly have an impact on the future of the Biden rule.
That was Mary Thomas Hart, Chief Counsel at the National Cattlemen's Beef Association. And here's where NCBA highlights that Wotus rule being in effect. If you are in the gray states on this map, that new Biden rule is the law of the land for your state. If you're in the green states, you're exempt for the time being. There's also a push going on in Washington, D.C. right now to get farmers to complete their ag census. Hubert Hamer, head of the USDA NASS, recently reminded growers that that data is very important.
Right now, we're working on our largest data collection activity, the 2022 Census of Agriculture. Very, very important, the most comprehensive set of information for and about U.S. agriculture. Basically, in a nutshell, it measures the structure of U.S. agriculture, how many producers, how many farms, the value, the demographic characteristics of farmers and ranchers from all over the country. And we're in the throes of the data collection activity right now, actually running a little bit behind pace of the 2017 census. So it's very important. We would appreciate anything you can do to help get the word out to producers. There's still time to provide that information. We'll be collecting information through the end of the spring. Again, these data will be with us for the next 5 years after it's released in February of 24. So it's very important that we have the most accurate information. Again, these are data down to the local area.
That's Hubert Hamer, head of USDA's NASS. And Max, have you sent in your ag census?
Well, a friend said they were still sending out forms trying to get them back. Maybe I should have a conversation with that friend about getting it done.
I think you should. This portion of This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Firestone Ag. The Firestone Ag Dealer Network offers you the support, inventory, and resources you need. Visit firestoneag.com to find your local certified dealer. Now it's time to talk markets. Joining us this week is Cesar Cruz, the Director of Research at Advanced Trading. Welcome, Cesar.
Thank you.
And also Brian Basting, economist with ATI. Brian, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Mike.
I want to turn my first question to you, Brian. Looking at the wheat market, we continue to see degradation in the quality of the winter wheat here, concerns about the Black Sea export corridor. When's the market going to take notice?
We've really got a historic divergence, Mike, between the classes here in the U.S. Record potential for the soft red winter wheat in terms of yields, and unfortunately, a disaster in some cases in terms of yield potential out west with the drought. So we're looking at that Kansas City to Chicago spread reach historic levels. I think what we're going to see, Mike, this summer is the potential for more soft red winter wheat feeding in the southeast. If that crop materializes as it looks today, that could displace some corn in terms of the feed rations for that southeast market. On the world scene, you hit the nail on the head. There's a lot of uncertainty. I believe it's May 18th. The next period where the Black Sea Grain Initiative ends. For the moment, those shipments are resuming and they are continuing, but it does not sound like it's as optimistic beyond May 18th. So for the moment, the U.S. is the residual supplier of wheat in the world. One final note, Mike, our export sales on the books for new crop wheat at this point from the U.S. are historically low.
Okay, so maybe some opportunities for exports to grow given the geopolitical challenges. But Brian, as you mentioned, we're seeing that wheat market influence the other grains, notably corn. And Cesar, while we've got you here, the topic of conversation in the corn market right now is Brazil. That safrinha corn crop is growing. What have you heard on the ground down there in Brazil about that crop?
Well, the safrinha crop is growing very well. My contacts are saying they are expecting exceptional yields. They are always calling for more rain, of course, but regardless of that, we can expect a 150 plus million metric tons production in Brazil. Brazil is also exporting a lot. We have heard rumors that Brazil is also exporting beans and corn to the U.S. recently. So it's not only the safrinha, it's also the soybean crop that's been very good in Brazil this year.
I'm glad you brought up that soybean crop. We have seen farmers across Brazil get that crop out of the fields. Cesar, how big does the trade think that Brazilian crop is going to be?
Well, again, probably 150 plus. I'm thinking about 154, very close to what the USDA is saying. For corn, 125 is not much far from what they're saying also. And exports are improving in Brazil. Brazil having a logistic problem right now, actually. But I think we can expect that Brazil, especially with Argentina now not being in the market, can export a lot of beans and corn this year.
Brian, as we watch these Brazilian beans make their way onto the global stage, what risks are you watching from a market perspective?
Just keep in mind, Mike, that the Brazilians have established a relationship with China to export corn. So as we move ahead to this 23-24 crop year, I remind your viewers, there is some downside risk to U.S. corn exports. So defend your balance sheet. Strongly encourage your viewers to work closely on that balance sheet, because as we look at these corn prices for 23-24, Mike, there's some vulnerability to the downside, assuming, of course, normal yields here in the U.S. But in terms of exports for 23-24, Cesar did a great job highlighting it could be 125 million tons or more of corn from Brazil. That's unprecedented, and a lot of those exports would go directly to China.
Brian, with that being the case, are you advising clients to manage that risk already in that 23-24 crop?
Yes, Mike. Definitely work closely with a trusted risk management consultant. Get a floor in place. Leave the upside open. Obviously, the crop is just beginning to be planted here in the U.S., Mike. Leave that upside open, but there's tools available to you to do that. In my opinion, an option is a good tool to consider. A put option gives yourself a floor in the market, leaves that upside open, but it's definitely still at some attractive levels, Mike, for 23 crop.
All right, check those out. Manage that risk when you can, not when you have to. When we return, we'll talk more markets with Brian Basting and Cesar Cruz of Advanced Trading. This portion of This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Firestone Ag. Harvey Firestone invented the first pneumatic farm tire, forever changing what it means to farm hard. Visit firestoneag.com to learn more about this history and tire solutions for today. We're back talking markets with Brian Basting and Cesar Cruz of Advanced Trading. And Cesar, you spent a lot of time looking at what's developing in South America. And we've talked about Brazil, massive soybean crop coming out of that country, much smaller crop coming out of Argentina this year. Can you talk about what farmers need to be thinking of as we watch that crop move towards summer?
Yeah, that's an interesting pattern that's happening in Argentina. So for the third year in a row, they've had problems with weather due to La Niña. And we've been seeing that both the USDA and other private informations, they are cutting the Argentina soybean and corn crop week after week. With that said, I think we can expect more cuts coming from the USDA. Both the Buenos Aires Grain Exchange and the Rosario Grain Exchange, they have numbers below the USDA number right now for both corn and beans. So the pattern that they have currently in Argentina is not very good for them. Crush is going to be probably half of what their capacity this year. Argentina is buying soybeans from Brazil. They are big exporters of oil and meal. They're not big exporters of soybean itself, but so we can expect that Argentina, for them to crush the amount of beans that they need to export bean and oil, they need to buy some more beans from Brazil, Paraguay, and Bolivia this year.
Cesar, while we're thinking about Argentina here, about 2 weeks ago, I understand they reintroduced their soy dollar export promotion program. How's it going so far? What have you heard on the ground in Argentina?
No, very well. I think among those three programs they had, this is the worst beginning that they've ever had. So I was telling Brian before, like if I'm a producer in Argentina and I know my crop is not in a very good condition, I don't think I have good incentives to sell my crop, right? In addition to that, I don't think the exchange rate that they gave to producers is very good. And on top of that, they have a huge export tariff for beans and other products in Argentina. Roughly 1/3 of what they gain is capped in tax tariffs in Argentina. So I don't think it's a good incentive for them to sell their crop.
All right, might see continued slow movement out of beans and product out of Argentina as we get geared up to plant in this country. Brian, I want to ask your thoughts here about what American farmers could be putting in the ground this year. Had the planting intentions report from USDA. Did that align with what you were thinking as this year gets closer?
Pretty much, Mike. I think the producers are really excited about planting corn here in 23. I think the challenge, Mike, will be up in the northern plains. As your viewers in that region know, a lot of snowpack, a lot of issues there to go before we really get into heavy planting, a slow start to the spring wheat planting. There's still time here yet in late April. We'll keep a close eye on that. But before we know it, Mike, we'll be looking at those crop insurance dates at the late end of May. That will really be on the front burner if we continue to get some challenges. For the moment, Mike, I don't see a lot of changes in that March report. One exception, maybe more double crop beans this summer. Mm-hmm. If bean price hangs in here, we may see more double crop beans, particularly if the soft red crop comes off in good time this summer.
So you'd be watching it where we've seen the rainfall in the eastern Corn Belt, could see that potential surge in bean acres.
Yeah, and the development of that wheat crop has been good so far, Mike. So if it comes off in time this summer, i.e. around the 1st of July, middle of July, I think a lot of growers will take a shot at planting double crop beans.
Brian, you mentioned spring wheat. Has the market put enough value in there to entice some acres to come back if they get that snow to melt in the Red River Valley?
It's a good question, Mike. Right now, we're not seeing much of a weather premium, I think, in that Minneapolis contract so far. A lot of time yet, but I think that there is some risk there that acreage number could edge down if we don't get more favorable conditions. Again, there's still time here. It's only late April, but it's something to keep an eye on moving forward. I think at the moment, there's very little weather premium in that Minneapolis contract.
All right, lots to watch here in this volatile market as spring gets closer. Our thanks to Brian Basting, economist with Advanced Trading, and Cesar Cruz, Director of Research with ATI. Gentlemen, thanks for joining us this week.
Thanks for having us here.
Colby Ag Tech is brought to you by Copperhead Ag Products. Visit copperheadag.com for more information.
Chad loves to talk about space launches and the possibilities coming down the road for farmers because of those. One of them is here and now, as he explains this weekend.
If you've followed our tech segment over the years, you know I'm a little bit of a space guy. And this past week, SpaceX launched their 25th flight of the year. It's a Falcon 9 rocket, as you can see right here. And the reason why this is so important to the ag industry in a lot of different ways is a lot of these missions that they're doing, some of them are for NASA, some are for the International Space Station, some for various amounts of different cargo. But SpaceX has been working hard over the last several years to launch their own satellite network for internet. This particular launch this past week did just that. Now, if you haven't seen this, it's pretty phenomenal, right? They bring this pencil-looking thing, the Falcon 9 rocket, and they landed on a remote drone ship out in the ocean, and I believe that's the 186th successful landing, which is unbelievable. But the reason why I wanted to put space travel on the tech segment this week is for two reasons. The first is this mission this past week added more satellites to Starlink. And what is Starlink? Starlink is a satellite internet service. The big thing is, and I've sped this up 4 times so you can see it, is it's low latency because Starlink is in low orbit compared to a normal geo satellite. Now, the good news I can report is, as you can see by this map right here, and you can go to starlink.com and see it yourself, they're getting widespread coverage in the U.S. Now, the one I ordered in early December of 21 actually shipped this week. So there's been a delay because there wasn't coverage for me in central Illinois. But I've got friends on the West Coast that have it, and they love it. It works very good. The price point is excellent. And as you can see right here, they've got it all figured out as far as where you put it, how you mount it. All those things are very, very seamless. The second thing I want to draw your attention to is something else that they've been working on. When I say they, I mean NASA and SpaceX, and this is the ship called Starship. And it looks a little far-fetched here in this video, but it's hard to really get an understanding of how big that is. That vessel is nearly 400 feet tall, and this past Thursday, they did the full first flight test, and you're going to see it here in 5 seconds as they count down the timer. This platform is unlike anything we've ever done in the U.S. 33 engines can haul 150 tons in that first part. That's the black part there is the Starship. It's going to be able to refuel in flight. It will land and take off from another planet so it can land on Mars or the moon. And this thing has been under development for several years, and this was a huge milestone this past week. You know, I remember when I was a young man in 1981 at my grandma's when the space shuttle came back, and I was so thrilled, and I can tell you, kind of rekindled a little bit of that excitement this past week when I watched this thing take off, because you're really, truly witnessing history. You know what? When you start talking about Starlink and the things that it can bring to your farm and ranch, there's a lot of this great technology that's around us every day.
That Starship launch this week turned out a little bit differently than expected. Starlink is out there and working over much of the country, Chad says. Yeah, he likes it a lot.
Thanks for joining us here for This Week in Agribusiness. Max, it's that time of the show we like to learn about ag from around the country.
We're headed to the Keystone State. You know what that is.
Pennsylvania.
All right, let's see what Charlie says about agriculture there.
The United States of America can be very different from one state to another, but one thing every state has in common is agriculture.
Hey everyone, I'm Charlie Behrens, and welcome back to the Agricultural States of America, where we explore the agriculture of different states and hopefully give you some more appreciation for all the great things that farmers are producing across America. Today we are talking about one of the original 13 British colonies that is often referred to as the Keystone State because of its strategic location to all the other colonies. We're talking about the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, also known as the Quaker State. Yes, Quakers, like the dude on the side of your oatmeal box. With the Appalachian Mountains running through the center of the state and the Allegheny and Pocono Mountains spanning the northeast, close to 60% of the state is covered in forests. But much of the remaining land is dedicated to farming. The farmers of Pennsylvania take up about 7.3 million acres of land, divided by more than 52,000 farming operations, which makes the average farm about 140 acres in size. Assuming I did my math right, which frankly not a great assumption. But bottom line, Pennsylvania has a lot of farms. In fact, Pennsylvania ranks 19th among the states in egg production, with almost 70% of farm revenue coming from livestock product sales. Milk is the state's most important and leading commodity. Pennsylvania dairy farmers produce 5.5% of the nation's milk supply, and the state is ranked 5th nationally in milk production. In addition, Pennsylvania farmers raise chickens for meat and eggs, cattle, goats, hogs, turkeys, and sheep. And to feed the state's livestock, local farmers grow corn and other grains, soybeans, hay, and haylage. Now, if you're not sure what haylage is, it's essentially hay, but instead of drying it before baling, haylage is baled at a high moisture level and sealed in plastic to be preserved by fermentation. Because let's be honest, fermentation makes everything better. Just ask the cows and everyone who likes beer. Also, did you know that Pennsylvania is home to the mushroom capital of the world? It's true, I'm talking about the small town of Kennett Square in southeastern Pennsylvania. Their water tower even says it too, and water towers have never told a lie. That is a fact. Pennsylvania's farmers grow more than half of the mushrooms consumed in the entire United States, roughly 500,000 pounds each and every year. And when you put it that way, these farmers sound like a bunch of fun guys. Don't they? Get it? Like fun guy? Sorry, dad joke. All right, enough shiitake. Let's get back to spore mushroom facts. It all started back in the 1800s when a local florist conceived the idea of growing mushrooms beneath his greenhouse benches. With success, he expanded and other farmers caught on. Now, button mushrooms are the most popular type in the US, and they include 3 main varieties. When they first appear, they're known as white buttons. As they grow and develop a brown color, they're categorized as cremini. Fully grown, they're what's known as portobello. It's kind of like watching your kid grow up, you know, send them off to college. But in this case, your kid is the mushroom and college is your stomach. So, great analogy, Charlie. In addition to a long list of nutritional benefits, mushrooms are the only edible non-animal source of vitamin D. Now, like many parts of the country, urban expansion can mean the loss of farms and farmland. To address this, Pennsylvania leads the nation in the number of farms and acres permanently preserved for agricultural production. So far, Pennsylvania has protected over 6,000 farms and more than 600,000 acres, now and forever, from commercial, industrial, or residential development. In fact, Pennsylvania farm families often sell their land at below market value to ensure it will remain farmland forever. And I will show my gratitude by ordering a pizza with extra mushrooms right now. All right, that's all the time we have for now, but you can always go to pivotbio.com/agstates and click on the show icon to explore more about the agriculture in your favorite states and test your knowledge to win great prizes and more. I'm Charlie Behrens, and we will see you next time on the Agricultural States of America.
Yeah, in the state of Pennsylvania, they started farmland preservation many, many years ago. As Charlie pointed out there in Ag States of America, I had a farmer tell me about 25 years ago in Pennsylvania, he said, you know, forever, locking it away forever. That's a long time.
It certainly is, Max. You know, we've seen some other states try these sorts of things. It'll be interesting to see how farmland preservation looks 100 years from now.
He mentioned the Amish. Of course, there are many of those farmers. Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. I was there to speak at their Farm City banquet a few years ago and went out into the field with a farmer. He was out there working in his field, an Amish farmer. He had a pull-type new idea picker that he was pulling behind an Oliver tractor.
Oh.
Oliver tractor on steel wheels, but he was allowed to use that tractor because he didn't have any sons capable of helping him. So I'm riding in the wagon. All of a sudden, corn isn't coming out of the spout into the wagon. And my buddy John and I yelled, "Hey, Mr. Martin, Mr. Martin." We found out that we knew more about that picker that he had borrowed from another farmer than he did. So I said, "Mr. Martin, do you have any tools?" "Well, I think so." We found a hammer, we found some pliers, we found some wire, got the chain back together, and got him moving again.
Got him back to working. Pennsylvania agriculture certainly is diverse, and Max, it'll be center stage here this year, at least in the House of Representatives, as their representative from the 15th District, G.T. Thompson, is chair of the House Ag Committee.
Yeah, there's more coming up here. Stay right here with us. This Week in Agribusiness, serving America's most essential industry, is brought to you by Case IH.
Thanks for joining us here for This Week in Agribusiness. You know, Max, the sun's out, the snow is melting. It won't be too much longer before farmers are getting together across the country to talk about some of their favorite things. And I've got a feeling for some folks that might include antique iron.
Yes, it's just a little more than 120 days away to that half century of progress coming up later in the summer that we've been talking about often. This is the year for it. Brian Newcomb joins us here this weekend because Illini FS, the cooperative with which he is affiliated, helps make that event possible in a big way, helping supply some of the fuel. But first of all, speaking of fuel, Brian, what are your growers talking about as you're visiting with them right now? Many of them, of course, have already taken care of their fuel supplies for this planting season, no doubt.
Yeah, that's for sure, Max. So historically speaking, we normally see the best pricing between December and February to contract. However, ever since the pandemic, it's been far from that. So we've got a really good risk management team at Growmark that will guide us as far as recommendations to contract fuel. So, and we've had a couple windows of opportunity here over the winter to book 10, 15, 20% of fuel needs for the spring and the fall.
I would imagine some will be thinking about propane supplies for grain drying later in the year. Yeah, and it may really be an important issue depending on when we get to plant the crops.
Yeah, exactly right, Max. And so far, we've had some guys here in Central Illinois that have gotten some planting in, both corn and beans. So yeah, depending on what the growing season's going to be like, there could be a real need for propane. And right now, pricing is looking pretty good. We haven't quite got it yet, but we've been encouraged that pricing will be advantageous.
Oh, good. Well, that Half Century of Progress show, somebody this week was asking me about it, and I was trying to describe to them just what it is. The largest vintage farm equipment show in America. How do you describe it, Brian? You've been there every year.
Yes, I have. And I tell you what, it is, words really can't adequately describe how marvelous and wonderful of a show it really is. I mean, it's a playground for a lot of older farmers and just tractor and old vintage machinery enthusiasts. It's quite remarkable.
The thing I like about it is it's a multi-generational event, though. You talk about older farmers, but you'll see grandfathers with their sons and daughters and grandsons and daughters explaining things. I always enjoy that, don't you?
Oh, very much so. I mean, the number of RTVs that are out there with younger families and younger generations of farmers, you're exactly right. I mean, I take my daughters there every year and we get on the RTV and we drive around and I mean, they just get right into that freshly plowed dirt and the freshly picked ear corn, and they have a ball. It's really exciting to see.
We'll look forward to seeing you August 24th through the 27th at that big event. And we thank Illini FS for playing a big role, helping make that possible, supplying a big chunk of our fuel out there at that show. We appreciate it.
It's absolutely our pleasure, Max. Thanks a lot.
Greg Solier now brings us his farm weather forecast for the week ahead, presented by Pivot Bio Proven 40. Predictable, productive, weatherproof. Turn to a better nitrogen. Turn to Pivot Bio Proven 40. Learn more at pivotbio.com. When will the warmer weather be here and the frost threat gone to stay? Many of you were wondering. A friend of mine out in his apple orchard west of Chicago this week, Greg, was asking that same question. Doug Nelson has a brand new wind machine that he's installed there at Wotus, not too far west of Chicago. He was demonstrating it for me. On those nights when it's nice and still, but that temperature is dropping, he'll need to fire that up and protect those tender blossoms.
Yeah, they had a good run and the need for that equipment last week across sections of Illinois, central and east central Illinois for that matter, and all the way down into Kentucky. They had readings generally at about 31, 32 for an hour or so, 34, 36 degrees for a couple of hours. Yes, reports of frost, a brief light freeze, and guess what? We'll do it all over again in those same locales and points on southward here in the coming week. So smart thinking to plug that equipment in. And here is the parade of weather systems that continue on into the Pacific Northwest. They jump the divide, the energized here, either track east or east-southeast, and more precipitation, more moisture, more primarily rain, but we had snow last weekend, of course, ongoing snow melt issues and a steady rise in area streams and rivers, eastern Montana, particularly across the Dakotas, the Red River Valley of the North, both north into Canada, south as well, and throughout Minnesota and Wisconsin. That trend continues on, although moisture totals this week will be down from what they were last week. In any event, here's the parade of weather systems on the move into the early to middle parts of the week. Another chunk of cold, high pressure moving on in. No significant, substantial warmth like we've had the past week across much of the heartland. Snippets of it, but it's a little testimony and vanguard to what the spring should continue to play on out. Back to cool, dry weather Pacific Northwest and into Northern California as we move on through the middle to late portions of the week. The water equivalency across the Sierra, about 58 inches. We've needed to tap into that the past couple of weeks with some low to mid 90s across the San Joaquin and Imperial Valley. Seasonal temperatures here. The next weather system generating maybe some degree of moisture in the worst drought areas of Kansas, Oklahoma, and Texas. You get a little moisture, then the winds pick up out of the west at 70 miles an hour, and you dry it right back out again. And again, the potential for a freeze maybe down to about parts of northern Kansas. Frost maybe to the Red River Valley of the south later in the week with quiet high pressure, seasonal weather conditions across the valleys of California.
Since you mentioned the Red River Valley of the south, let's talk about the one to the north where the flooding is occurring. Will that be made worse, or can that get a little bit better in the week ahead?
Should get a little bit better, yeah. Moderate to major flooding, the worst they've seen up here since about 2017, of course, years after that having to do with the dryness and drought. So the flooding issues here, but it's high pressure, cold weather, but it's dry weather. The next weather system bringing snowflakes and sprinkles off the Great Lakes into Michigan, the lower lakes region. Frost and freeze potential here. Parts of the west central Corn Belt back into the central plains, middle to late parts of the week. A little more El Nino-ish looking set of weather systems that take more of a central and southern plains route into the southern Corn Belt and points south and southeast with cold high pressure here through the upper Midwest. We've made some pretty good progress relative to early spring with field work and planting over the central and southern Corn Belt prior to the recent rains, and the rains coming here for this week, especially Missouri leading the pack. Some scattered showers and thunderstorms into Texas, 95 to 100 degree heat at times, but that'll be eased up out of the southern reaches of the state. Cool, dry weather from the Delta on eastward, and some frost potential all the way down to sections of the Ohio Valley, and another prod of some cold air into Kansas, and frost potential there too, middle to late parts of the week as showers and thunderstorms light up into the Delta on East Max, and they'll probably be heavy and severe again.
Show us that eastern part of the country.
We shall, and coming off rains of the past couple of weeks, it's back into another dump of cold air. Frost to at least I-70, freeze farther to the north, but ongoing flooding will ease with high pressure and control. A rain snow system into the northeast and New England. Still some chilly weather through much of the Great Lakes region, the northeast of New England, and the cool weather as well, with rain back in the forecast for outdoor work and field work, central and southern Corn Belt, middle to late portions of the week. Cool, dry, high pressure for the mid-Atlantic region. The next weather system onto the southern plains heads to the east. We light them up again with showers and thunderstorms over the parts of the southeast, including maybe some drought relief for parts of Florida.
Greg Solier is back with his extended farm weather forecast for the country, presented by Pivot Bio-Proven 40. Predictable, productive, weatherproof. Turn to a better nitrogen. Turn to Pivot Bio-Proven 40. Learn more at pivotbio.com. Well, I got brave the other day. I took the old man analog rain gauge and turned the tube upright so the rain would settle in. Very confident it wouldn't freeze now, right?
A little frost on it, maybe. But, you know, hey, it is springtime. It's El Nino. And by and large, you know what? That El Nino weather pattern, yes, we have transitioned from La Nina to a quick neutral state. And we seem to think that El Nino is here to stay. And maybe not the greatest of news with field work and spring planting operations early to mid-springtime. We'll keep you posted. Ongoing flooding, but nothing really out of control here. Maybe a quarter to a half inch. The northern extent of the next weather system may here get to about I-80 with an inch worth. We are going to keep an eye on the central and southern Corn Belt areas for a couple of thunderstorm outbreaks with really 2 to 3 inch downpours possible. More heavy weather in the southeastern states down through Florida. This is good news. Dry for the northeast into New England, and maybe a little moisture as well as the week wears on into the Pacific Northwest. So the flooding easing, not the greatest of situations, not the greatest of perhaps planning as well across the heart of the Corn Belt.
Yeah, the first week of May a few years ago, maybe 8 to 10 years ago, there was a big snow. I remember across the northern Corn Belt. Is there anything like that on your radar screen?
Well, here we go on temperatures. If you get this going, yeah, that brings some degree of concern here. And wouldn't be surprised, yeah, there may be some late season snows into the first week of May for parts of the upper Midwest, the Dakotas, across the Great Lakes region. Note the chill all the way down to the southeast. And yeah, where skies clear, winds drop back, the air will likely be cold enough for some frost and freeze potential, maybe across, again, parts of the upper Midwest into the central Corn Belt. Most of the weather action here here over the eastern states. Back to the more normalized moisture for the heartland, drying out southern plains, and some good late season moisture, we think, for the valleys of California into the Pacific Northwest.
How do you see the week of May 8th?
Temperatures, boy, we got to try and get them to moderate and warm up, get these soils back to where they need to be. And there's some moderation here. The cold air eases to the north. An area of high pressure aloft over the southeastern states, the southwest. So some warming expected there, but that trough position is still there. So systems from the Pacific Northwest drop to the plains. They head to the north and northeast. That temperature compaction. There's more moisture back in the forecast and fieldwork delays, including some late season snow for parts of Montana and the upper lakes region.
When you get into the week of May 15th, what do you see there?
Trying to warm it up, but looks like we're going to fail miserably, at least in over some areas of the country. Look at this compaction of cold, almost winter-like in the Canadian prairie, midsummer-like here. That is one voracious jet stream pattern for the time of year, probably 150 plus miles per hour. So we'll drive the weather systems, and with that air up aloft is strong, showers and thunderstorms heavy and severe here. Again, yeah, get the picture. Field work and planting delays across a wide area of the Corn Belt. Some drought relief for parts of the plains. Yeah, I know we're approaching Memorial Day, but some snow near the Canadian border. More normalized precip over the southeastern states. Dry time for Texas and across the southwestern parts of the country, too.
Next on This Week in Agribusiness, it's Max's Tractor Shed, spotlighting another great American tractor.
On his farm in Iowa, Vernon Neuenhaus used this John Deere tractor to produce quite a few crops over the years. Of course, there's a story behind it. There always is. And Max's Tractor Shed, brought to you by Mystic Lubricants. Mystic Lubricants made to make it last. Vernon Neuenhaus produced about 60 crops altogether over the years there on the farm at Primgar, Iowa. And a bunch of those were grown with the help of this tractor made in 1954. It was his first tractor on the farm there. Mr. Neuenhaus passed away December 24th of 2019, but his sons made sure the tractor didn't get away. Let's take a look at the tractor a little bit closer. His son Barry specifically wanted to buy that tractor. It was a little bit of a problem with that tractor though, because it had a cracked head and there was a problem there also with a stuck piston. But Barry worked on it and he brought that tractor back to life, to be sure. Another son, Kelly, shared with me that he, Barry, and another brother, Jim, all wanted to farm. Their sister today works for a farm co-op, but all three of the boys have their own farms that they started as Dad and Mom's operation couldn't support them all. Vernon said back in the day he wanted his boys to either succeed or fail on their own. And son Kelly said to me, thank him for that. The Neuenhaus family, understandably, would like to keep that tractor, that John Deere Model 60, around for quite some time as a tribute to Dad. Vernon Neuenhaus at Primgar, Iowa. Well, I would imagine there's something green selling in many other colors as well at Big Iron Auctions. Mark Stock steps in now with his weekly report.
Well, Max, the auction industry has evolved with technology, and whereas 10 years ago, there were not very many auctions that were conducted in April and May because everybody was busy in the field, whereas today, people can take the auctions with them on their mobile devices, and we've got some great sales taking place on BigIron.com and Selvin Auctioneers just in the next couple weeks. This upcoming week, there'll be land selling in Morrill County, Nebraska for the Art and Nancy Mazer Living Trust, pivot irrigated land by Bayard in Morrill County. We've also got land selling in Reno County, Kansas for the Otis L. Pinkerton Trust, 156 acres selling in 2 tracts. We have a special spring pair and replacement female sale on April the 25th and an auction on Thursday, April the 27th by Kennard, Nebraska. That's getting a lot of attention. A 2021 John Deere 8R 340 mechanical front tractor with only 335 hours will sell for the Lauritsen Enterprise retirement sale. Also selling a 2022 John Deere S770 combine with only 32 separator hours. A 2021 John Deere 1775 NT ExactEmerge 16-row 30 high-speed planter will sell. The equipment selling on the Lauritsen Enterprise Inc. retirement sale is exceptional. Max, the market is still hot. Great time to be scheduling items to sell to take advantage of this hot market.
Our FFA chapter tribute is brought to you by Pioneer, developing new generations of seed innovations for new generations of farmers. Pioneer, what's next happens here. And now it's time to meet that next generation of agricultural leaders. This week, Mary Jones, the Vice President for the Northern Region of the Indiana State FFA, joins us. And Mary, life as an FFA state officer certainly is busy. What are you up to today?
It definitely is. I'm actually meeting my teammate to do some preparations for our Indiana FFA State Convention in June. So we are off on the road getting ready for that.
That is very cool. Mary, if you would, tell our audience a little bit about the Northern Region of the Indiana FFA. What do you cover and what agriculture is practiced there?
Yeah, so me and my teammates serving as state officers, there are two of us who are vice presidents covering the North and South region. So the Northern region is anything north of Indianapolis. And so we all live together and kind of cover a lot of those events in state across the state together, but my title is over the Northern region, which is north of Indianapolis.
Now, you have served many years here in FFA, Mary, and what are some of the highlights of your service to the organization?
I have been involved for as long as I can remember. My dad was my FFA advisor, so I grew up traveling with FFA since I could walk, and so it's been a really important part of my life. I have had the privilege of serving in different leadership roles and doing every contest my chapter offered, and then now serving as the state officer, so it's been full circle for me.
Mary, what are the goals for the state officer team here this year for the Indiana FFA?
Our main goals consist around growing our membership, which we have been able to do a lot this year. We actually just hit 14,000 members in the state of Indiana, which is a huge accomplishment that our team was really looking forward to. And spreading awareness for ag education. Multiple of my teammates are wanting to go to be ag teachers for their future plans. And so that's something that's really important to our team, and I feel like we've accomplished that well.
Well, that is fantastic. Congratulations on the membership growth. And Mary, what do you hope your future holds?
After my year of service as a state officer, I will be attending the University of St. Francis in Fort Wayne, studying communications and journalism, with the hopes of using that career to produce stories about agriculture and to share the stories.
That is fantastic. We wish you the best of luck. Mary Jones, Indiana FFA Northern Region Vice President. The southern plains have been gripped by drought for the past 3 years. Max, we've talked about that on this program. The winter wheat conditions continue to drop across western Kansas, Oklahoma, and Texas. But unfortunately, drought and dryness aren't the only concerns for producers down in that region. I know you had a chance recently to check in on some other headline-generating news events that happened there out of Dimmitt.
It's a good agriculture area of Texas, to be sure, Mike. Dimmitt, Texas. And it's the home of KDHN Radio, where Todd and Nancy Whalen have that local radio station out there a little bit north of town, as I recall. Right, Nancy?
Yes, we are 2 miles north of Dimmitt.
You can see a ways out there across the prairie, can't you?
You can see forever out here, Max. It's
You can see Albuquerque.
You can almost see the lights of Albuquerque.
That's what I thought. Back to the west of you there. You're not too far east of Clovis, New Mexico, right?
About an hour. We're about an hour east of Clovis, New Mexico.
A few days ago, when that explosion and fire took place at a dairy farm, that wasn't far from you. That was to the other direction, southeast toward Hart, Texas, if I'm correct. Todd, is that right?
Yeah, we're about 12 miles from that dairy farm that caught on fire, and it was actually a big mess. They just about had it out at one point and had to go get another fire extinguisher. They already went through 2 of them, went for the 3rd one, and after that, the insulation caught fire, and it was a big mess for hours over there.
People might be wondering why it spread so quickly and why it became such a tragic blaze. Was it the insulation? Was it wind? What was the propellant there for that?
It really was insulation. There wasn't much wind that day.
Thankfully, it was not a windy day, which we typically have wind here. But it was a methane gas explosion as a result of the fire. And then that just, it was the components of the building that burned so quickly and just took over. We were told it was about a half-mile long barn, and within 20 minutes, it was completely engulfed.
Disposal of the carcasses has been a challenge, has it not?
Yeah, it has been.
That's what we understand. It has. Most of the dairies in the area have been sending volunteers to help with the cleanup, providing equipment and people to help them do that. And we understand that that part is complete.
There has been quite an expansion of dairying in your region there in the Texas Panhandle, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct, Todd?
Yeah, a lot of the guys have moved in here from California because of the land values, but we're having some water issues out here. We haven't had much of a winter, hardly any rain. We've already had temperatures yesterday of 85 degrees, blowing dust, a red flag warning most of the week. So we're dry. We need some rain from Chicago.
That drought monitor map, every week we check it to see if there's any improvement down your way. Precious little, it seems. Thank you for taking time to share a minute or two with us again here on This Week in Agribusiness. Nancy, Todd, have a good day. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Max.
Todd and Nancy Whalen, KDHN, the radio station in Emmett, Texas. It's good listening on your app there if you want to tune in sometime, Michael.
Absolute devastation, Max. The images of that plume of black smoke rising into the sky was just incredible.
They said it was visible for 80 miles. Of course, everything's visible for 80 miles in that part of the world. I noticed some animal rights groups were trying to make hay out of this. Let the record show the dairy industry takes great care of its cows. If you've been in an operation lately, you know that so well.
That is so true, Max. These events are very few and in between.
We'll see you next week on This Week in Agribusiness. Have a great weekend, a safe weekend. So long. This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Case IH. This Week in Agribusiness is produced by Omax Communication in association with 22 Creative Group. We invite you to visit us online at agbizweek.com.